Thank you for joining today's conference call with Governor Andrew Cuomo. I will now turn it over to Governor Cuomo.
How you doing, guys? Governor Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, however you want to say it. Happy Columbus Day. I'm joined by Melissa DeRosa, Robert Governor Mejica, Dr. Zucker, Gareth Rhodes, Beth Garvey. Sorry for doing the briefing late, but I was out celebrating Columbus Day, like I'm sure many of you on the telephone were doing. Before we go to the numbers, I want to make a larger point. I've been watching the news, TV news, reporting 30 states are showing an increase in the number of COVID cases and putting numbers on the screen on the increase of COVID cases. Many of those numbers come from extrapolating from the infection rate that the states report. I think there is, I think we're in a place where numbers are losing their meaning. Second, COVID, I don't believe, goes away anytime soon. They talk about the fall, and we're seeing an increase across the country, which is what they projected. But this is not a second wave. Second wave is a virus mutates and comes back. That's a second wave, right? We're still in the first wave. And this is just inability to deal with the first wave nationwide. Even if they come up with a vaccine, you then have to administer the vaccine. There will be people who will not receive the vaccine for one reason or another. We went through this in the past with vaccines. Some people don't believe in vaccines, and they won't take the vaccine. Some people will be non-responsive. Some people will be hard to reach. Some people won't be able to afford it. Some people will be afraid of it. So I think it's realistic to say, at least for a year, you will be dealing with COVID. That's without the mutated virus, etc. And that may be an optimistic scenario. Doesn't mean that once they start with the vaccine, some people won't have the vaccination. And by the way, the vaccine, some people say you need 2 dosages of the vaccine. But you will still have COVID outbreaks, let's say, for a year. So you'll still be needing to manage COVID outbreaks for, optimistically, 1 year of time. How you do it is very important because that's the difference between a cluster and community spread, right? The president has been promoting the politics of denial on COVID, and he's done that from day one. He's doing the politics of denial even after he had COVID. It's not a problem. You get COVID and you get in the helicopter and you go to Walter Reed, and Walter Reed sends a team of doctors and they give you experimental drugs that nobody else can get, and then you're fine. Yeah, that's denial. And it's a disgusting denial when you see the number of lives lost. There are some states that have followed the politics of denial and turned it into science fiction. The theory was, if you test less, you will find fewer cases. And if you find fewer cases, you have less of a problem. That's almost a laughable concept. But you're now seeing it in the numbers as if it is an actual representation. You look at the chart that I sent you. Take a state like Florida. Florida was doing 428,000 cases. 428,000 tests at their peak on a high week. 428,000 tests in a week. Last week they did 153,000 tests. Okay? Close to a third. Why? That's the Trump politics of denial. We only have cases because we're testing. If we test less, we will have fewer cases. So Florida goes from 428,000 tests per week to 153,000 tests. Texas goes from 520,000 tests to 349,000 tests. Georgia goes from 210,000 tests to 132,000 tests. Arizona goes from 94,000 tests to 70,000 tests. How can your testing numbers be going down? Our testing numbers are going up because this was all about ramping up testing, getting your state labs sophisticated on how to do testing, acquiring the reagents. When we started testing, we could only do 500 tests per day. 500 tests per day. We now do 120,000 tests per day because you ramp up. You would have to purposely ramp down the number of tests. Why would you do that? Because it's the politics of denial being implemented in a public health system, which is based on science fiction. Science fiction is, if you don't test, you won't find the positive cases, and therefore they don't exist. That is science fiction. But that's what you see happening in some states in this country. So when people are listening to the news or reading the news, this is how many cases, this is in this state, this is in this state, here's the map with all these different colors. Part of it is all science fiction because it's not accurate, because they're not collecting data that is accurate, because they don't want to. It's the politics of denial actualized in state data. How do you go down in the number of tests, and why? And by the way, why isn't that reported? Which would then dispel the myth, right? Florida, Georgia, Texas, Arizona, this is how many cases we have. No, it's not. It's the number of cases you have discovered with your reduced number of tests, right? And that's just a sample. New York, we're doing the exact opposite. New York, our strategy is now to identify micro clusters. What is a microcluster? I've never heard that before. You're right, you've never heard it before because it's a new term that we use in New York. We do more testing than any other state, so we have more data. We also are obsessive about getting the incoming case numbers from the hospital. You map those cases and you find the greatest predominance of cases in a geographic area. That is a microcluster. For us, the greatest number of cases in a microcluster is relative only to us in New York. In other words, we have a 1% just about infection rate. We find a 2% cluster. To us, that's a microcluster. to other states, that's nothing. Because relatively, our numbers are so much lower. So we say in our microclusters, we have an infection rate of 3 or 4%, okay? Today, for example, the microcluster is 3.7%, all right? Red zone. You look at the chart we sent out, 3.7%. Illinois, statewide, is 4.2. Texas is 7.6. Ohio is 3.7. Michigan again is 3.3. North Carolina is 6. Jersey is 3. Florida is 11. Virginia is 4.8. Right? Georgia is 6. Pennsylvania is 7. Arizona is 6. How can you call a hotspot a microcluster or a hotspot if it is lower than all these other states? It's not a national hotspot. Nationwide, those numbers are better than many states. Only relative to New York do we consider it a microcluster. Only when you're at 1% does 3% seem like an issue. Most of these other states would celebrate if they had 3%. 3% in a lot of states would be a safe zone. In New York, it's a microcluster. And we're going to be doing more of this. Wherever we find a concentration of cases relative to our norm, that is a microcluster. It is only relevant to New York because every other state is in a much different situation. So when we say red zone, microcluster, Brooklyn, Queens, yes, but that is not, it's not accurate to say New York State has hot spots, which is a term we use in the state, but it's not nationwide a hot spot. It's nationwide a cool spot compared to where other states are, right? And it's because we're this diligent that we keep the number down. I talk to governors all day long. They say, how do you stay at 1%? I say, when I see 2 cases on the same block, I run to that block. That's how. So yes, hotspot, even though it's a lower percentage than many other states. Okay? I just want to make sure we're clear, because we're going to continue to do this. We're getting more refined in our targeting. And as we go into the fall and the numbers nationwide are going up, we want to purposefully keep our numbers down. Even 1%, by the way, is an absurdly low margin to operate on and unrealistic. I understand that intellectually. However, emotionally, I want to set the bar very high or very low, as the case may be. But that's what that chart will show you. And I just want to put this conversation in some sort of, since it's read nationally, it has to be in the national focus. Look at the New York State infection rate compared to other states. We're at 1.1, right? And again, our hotspots are doing better than many states. Today's numbers, the hotspot number is 3.7. That's actually down, but this is a holiday weekend, so again, take these with a grain of salt. The state is 1.05, so we're at 1. The state, if you add in the microclusters, the red zones, it is at 1.1. Now, that number is also misleading because it oversamples areas that you know have an abnormally high rate, okay? Some of you reporters are political reporters. If I released a poll and said normally Democrats in a poll are 44%, this poll has 60% Democrats, you would say, yeah, but then it's skewed. Yes, we don't do weighting in these polls, but I'm telling you, we've been oversampling the microclusters because we want to know what's going on there. If you add that oversample into the statewide sample, it skews the statewide sample, and that's 1.1. But if you like to report skewed results, then you can be my guest. 12 New Yorkers passed away. 878 were hospitalized. That is up 58. The largest single identifiable addition is from the microclusters. The hospitalization rate, 878. Remember, we were at 18,000 hospitalized. So the hospitalization number to us is more relevant as an indicator for where people are, where the cases are coming from again, right? We can do it. Testing tells you where the cases are. Hospitalizations tell you where the serious cases are. And that's why we track the hospitalizations the way we do. 185 in ICU, 86 intubated, and that's basically it. By region, 1.1 New York City. That's a problem. That's Brooklyn and Queens. Capital region, 0.9. Central New York, 1.4. Finger Lakes, 0.8. Long Island, 1.2. Mid-Hudson, 1.9. That's Rockland Orange. Mohawk Valley, 0.4. North Country, 0.2. Southern Tier, 0.9. Western New York, 1.1. Western New York is better than it's been, but we would like to see that at 1. Orange is 2.3. Rockland is 4. Broome, we have that one cluster, is 3. Brooklyn is 1.2. Okay, operator, questions?
And at this time, if you would like to ask a question, you will need to press star 1 on your telephone keypad. To withdraw your question, press the pound key. We'll pause for just a moment to compile the Q&A roster. And your first question comes from the line of Morgan McKay from Spectrum News. Your line is open.
How are you, Morgan?
Good, Governor. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Watching Dr. Fauci on TV.
Oh, is he on?
Saying that he wasn't was taken out of context in the Trump ad. I know how he feels. I was taken out of context in a Trump ad.
That's true. You were, actually. So I have a question for you. So on Wednesday, there are nursing home groups gathering at the Capitol. They're calling for the state to release nursing home numbers. Now, I know you guys have released numbers in the past, but just not the complete total of how many nursing home residents were taken to the hospital and later passed away there. During the Senate legislative hearing about a couple months ago, back in September, or August, the health commissioner, Dr. Howard Zucker, said that he was going to be releasing those numbers. The Senate Democrats have sent a letter, as well as the Senate Republicans, and was just wondering when you guys were planning to release those numbers.
Yeah, look, on the numbers, there's a lot of politics being played, right? The Republicans have attacked almost all the Democratic states on nursing home deaths because the Democratic states initially had the worst COVID situations, if you remember. As it turns out, the Republicans have stopped attacking on nursing homes because now the Republican states, Florida has the worst nursing home problem because the Republican states are actually going up. But this was a pure political attack. The simple fact is, yes, people passed away in nursing homes. That's where the virus preyed on people. And we are number 46 out of 50 states, 46 out of 50, in terms of number of deaths, percentage of deaths in nursing homes, 46 out of 50. So if somebody's concerned about, you had a lot of nursing home deaths, we had a lot of deaths, period. We're number 46 out of 50 in terms of nursing home deaths as a percentage. So if you're looking for something specific, there are 45 other states that would be more likely for you to be looking at. Dr. Zucker's on the phone. I don't have any new information on it unless Dr. Zucker does.
Nothing specific, but as I said, and I said at the hearing, that we are making sure that all the data is accurate. We will release it once we have checked to be sure there's no duplication, and I promised all along that I'd get that information to you. Thank you.
Okay.
And we continue to do all the inspections, the PPEs, and everything else to make sure the nursing homes are safe.
Okay, thank you. Operator, next question.
Okay, your next question comes from the line of Josh Einiger from wabc-tv. Your line is open.
Hi, Governor. How are you today?
How are you, Josh?
I'm well, thank you. So we've been watching in the past week this sort of sideshow developing in Borough Park as an element of the Hasidic community pushes back against this whole red zone designation. And I'm wondering, between that and the fact that the spikes have been tied to that larger community to begin with, how aware you are of a growing sense of anger among other people who are in the red zone. And I'm wondering, my question is, are you worried about a rise in anti-Semitism or hate crimes? And if so, how do you navigate that dynamic? It seems very fraught with difficulty.
Yeah. I handle it with the truth. Here's the fact, Josh. They're not annoyed at the quote-unquote red zone regulations. They're annoyed at the initial close-down regulation 7 months ago that they never followed. That's what has happened here. They never followed any of the close-down regulations. I was talking to a group of leaders from the community. They said, well, how about this? We'll go to 75% capacity in the synagogues. I said, 75? You were already, the regulation was already only 50. What do you mean 75? They never followed any of the regulations. And the regulations weren't enforced. Okay? That's why the infection rate is going up. Really, when you think about it, Josh, it makes the case of how the regulations actually worked. Because here you have almost a test case, okay? Let's say the state follows the regulations, but then we have a sample that we leave out that doesn't follow the regulations. Did the infection actually go up? Yes, it did, because they have never been following the regulations with any rigor. So it's not just the red zone. I had an eye-opener in talking to them. They never followed the regulations. And now you see the result. Why not? Look, I understand very well the Hasidic community. I've worked with them for many years. As I said to you, my father was very close to them. I've been very close to them. I'll tell you a funny sidebar story that's not worth your time. My father becomes governor. I'm 23, 24 years old. My father hires a rabbi who was very close to him, Rabbi Israel Moshowitz, God rest his soul, to be special assistant to the governor for Jewish affairs. The ultra-Orthodox community says, that's very nice, but Dr. Moshowitz, Rabbi Moshowitz, is too liberal for us, and we want our own liaison. And my father says, okay, who do you want as the liaison? Well, it has to be someone closer than the special assistant, Dr. Moshowitz. So who do you want? We want Andrew to be the liaison. I had just finished working with many of the Orthodox groups in the campaign, so literally I met with them every week. I'm very close to them. I understand them. I understand the cultural differences and the religious differences. But I also understand death is death. And the infection rate and hospitalizations lead to death, and death is death. And Judaism and the Torah and saving lives, this is also religious doctrine. If there is any implication of anti-Semitism in any way manifested, I will fight it, Josh, with all my might, the way I always have. We passed the first domestic terrorism law after the hateful act in Rockland County, the attack. No one has done more to fight anti-Semitism or to support Israel, and I will continue that. And that is would be a really tortured interpretation of what's going on here.
And your next question comes from the line of Shannon Longworth from News 12 Westchester, Hudson Valley.
Hi, Governor. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing pretty well. I just have a quick question. We, of course, have clusters in Orange and Rockland counties. Do you have the numbers on how many cluster violations have been given out so far in those counties?
I do not. It's been it's a holiday weekend, and we just started last week, so I don't have the numbers. But as soon as I have, we'll put them out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's take one more, operator.
And your next question comes from the line of Ryan Terrinelli from the New York Law Journal. Your line is open.
Thank you, Governor, for taking my call.
My pleasure.
I have two questions. One is, do you have any reaction to the court rulings that came down, I believe both of them on Friday, essentially upholding your regulatory scheme for the red, orange, and yellow zones, if you have any reaction to that. And then secondarily, if maybe hopefully Dr. Duggar can speak to this, if there are any, how concerning the situation of long-timers is, or long-termers, essentially people who have months and months of symptoms, if they can speak to anything that the Department of Health is doing to address that situation.
Okay, I'll take the first one. Dr. Zucker will take the second one. The court rulings were wholly consistent with the prior ruling. The prior ruling, because we had gone through this once before, was that you can't have a different set of rules for religious organizations that you have for businesses. That was the ruling, that if you have a public health emergency and you say businesses, gatherings must be X percent, 50%, you can't have a different percentage for religious organizations. There can't be a differentiation. That was the first ruling. And what our current regulations are totally compliant with that. So I'm not surprised at all. Also, remember, when we're talking about people in the zone, these are the reason we call them microclusters. They're very small. We're talking about a diameter of a couple of miles, right? That's why the context here is so important. We're talking about tiny geographic areas. They're not even defined by population, but they can be like 1 mile in diameter. They're just one very particular spot. There's not a lot of people relative to the state within that spot. But no, I don't see that. And on the rulings, there was no legitimate basis for the suit to begin with. I think it was more politically motivated than anything else. Dr. Zucker, do you know anything about long-termers?
Sure. Thank you, Governor. So that's an excellent question, and this is one of those issues where the more we learn about the virus, the more we'll understand exactly what the effects. And I've read a fair amount about this and the long-term effects of both heart damage that can occur, long-term effects of those who have inflammation. And we don't have exactly an answer on this, but this is going to require follow-up and probably a longitudinal study, a national study. I suggest that the CDC, NIH take this on, as we have done for other diseases that have potential sequelae or effects after they're initially have the damage to the body. So I don't have an answer for you right now, and I do believe that ultimately we'll learn more about this. And as a physician, I am concerned about this, and I think that all doctors who are caring for patients with COVID should be alert and attuned to any of the potential effects that their patients may have, and to take their concerns seriously. Sometimes physicians dismiss someone's concerns, but take them seriously. And I hope that we'll have a database at some point to track this. Thank you.
Okay, operator, thank you very much. Members of the press, thank you very much. My guys, I'm going to call you back on something else, so don't run out of the house before I can get you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
And this concludes today's conference call. Thank you for participating. You may now disconnect.